All right, so thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to share my screen now. Just share my entire desktop. I figured to have this sync call just because there's two things that I've been like one main thing that I've been looking at over the past few days, which is the kind of the flow for the prototype, which the intent of it was to cover the journey from the handbook to the static site editor, and then kind of like the different ways of handling or like allowing users to create proper merge requests with like titles and descriptions in the flow, and then kind of looking at the journeys on, how would you add another file change to an existing MR. And 2 days ago, I brought up this one, talking about potentially creating an MR before you even enter any changes or anything like that. And I was following this thread, and I agree with everyone here about waiting to make an action before creating an MR, because there could be issues with CI minutes or orphan or dangling MRs and branches all over the place. So, and the other thing that I had a discussion with my manager about this was that the idea of giving users control. So, if we're starting to create MRs for people automatically, they might not know, and then they have to manage or close them. So that's not a good experience that we want to introduce. So with the spirit of one branch, one MR, I'm just going to jump into the flow, and then I'll feel free to jump in at any time to leave any state any comments. From here, we're going to test out this new contribute to this page flow, and then clicking on this will take you to the single site editor, but what we're just going to test today is the static site editor. So you jump into the static site editor here. I haven't done any edits yet, so this goes back to that not creating the MR by default at the start. If I click on, if I made some changes here, then there'll be some kind of signifier that says unsaved changes. So here it's up to the user to either commit via save or publish changes, which would create the which would commit and then create the MR as well. So here I'll click save, and then this is the stage where I propose that we create the MR and the branch at the same time. For this solution validation round, this is a question that I'll open to you guys. That we're not gonna allow them to change the name of the branch. It'll be whatever what we have right now with the auto-generated name for the branch. But if people really feel the need to change the name of the branch, then that's something that we can consider adding in the future. But essentially, this is our current flow that we have right now, but it's just moved up forward the moment when you create an MR. So,
Michael, quick question. Yes. Do you want questions as you go, or
yeah,
wait till then?
Questions as we go would be great.
So I'm just having a look at this, and if my understanding is right, we'll almost be hiding the branch from the user. Their main interaction point will be the MR, and so my question is, does it even matter for us mentioning what the branch is there, especially if we're not going to allow them to edit it? But I feel like even allowing them to edit the branch, that seems like a really advanced use case, and probably not in line with our immediate target audience.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's the same, like I think like our current success screen, how we
Yeah,
had the link to all of those information, and
we
like
stripped
for
it
me
out.
it makes sense, and
Yeah.
I kind of like, like I like seeing it there, but it doesn't really make sense for the average, for our target audience, and that's
Mm,
why we have the issue to create a new success page. So
mm,
in that same vein, I'm questioning, like this might actually just confuse somebody. If one of our pillars is to abstract away the complexity of Git and the Git workflow, then it's probably best we just don't tell them about this branch that will be created,
right.
unless there's a valid reason for them to know about this. And I looked at this recording from the issue earlier today, and I think from the workflow, there's no real, I think there's an opportunity to choose, I think, from existing MRs down the line.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't see a need to actually expose the branch name to them.
Cool. Good. Good. I'm happy to go down that road, like continue down that road.
I wanted to jump in and just to explore the flip side of that argument. If we're doing one branch to one MR, I'm curious about just what would the impact be if we expose the branch, but not the MR when you're selecting multiple MRs. So if you think about the saving and committing workflow prior to creation of an MR, you might create a new branch, commit some edits, come back to it, commit some more edits, and then generate an MR. So if the workflow we're really trying to achieve is the ability to retrieve some work in progress, draft state, that could map nicely to a branch name rather than an MR object.
Mm.
And then having you presenting a way to switch between branches to set the state of the editor. And then whether that branch has an MR or not, we could just change the state of the button, whether it's publish a new MR or append the changes to an existing MR, because we would know if that branch already had an open MR.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
So I thought about that, and I'm just gonna go ahead and click on create merge request. So, oops. I thought about like starting off with the branch. Like I guess that was the thing on Monday when I was like, oh, do I start with the branch or with the MR? And with the MR, we have this naming convention at the moment at GitLab, this whole work in progress prefix to the name. And the other thing was like from a branch, I think, yeah, we can do some smarts to like create a merge request from a branch. But the part where I kind of got confused was like, how do you know which branch to show up to like surface on the selection? Because it could be like different worlds that you have branches for. But with a MR, you can add labels and things to that for classification. So let's say these were static site editor changes, like we could add like little labels on the back end of this to like help surface them easier. And the complexity of linking up a branch to a MR is like one that I wanted to eliminate, but at this, with the spirit of one branch, one MR, and also like everything starts off as a merge request. So that was my kind of thinking around just forcing or nudging the behavior to start off in an MR, even if you're working on in like draft stuff. But this is why I wanted to have the sync call, because I think it's a little bit tricky to discuss sometimes.
I just want to call out that everything starts with a merge request is a GitLabism. It's not a industry standard kind of thing. So while that might be true for what we expect team members to do with the handbook, it might not be the standard use case for all the users out there.
That's a good point. I also just had a question about functionality with merge requests that maybe the engineers could help. Is the WIP, the work in progress prefix, a standard feature of our like merge request, or is that a convention we use here that we've extended within? Like, is that available?
It's something. It's a baked in GitLab feature.
Okay.
Where you can, when you create a merge request, you can actually toggle the WIP prefix on the title. And if a MR has a WIP prefix, you cannot merge that MR until it's removed. So it's almost like
I wasn't sure if that was like exclusive to our project or if that was available to everybody. So that's great. I kind of assumed it was available. I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my only real concern with starting with an MR, I completely agree that everything starts with an MR as a GitLab principle is well aligned with this workflow. I'd like to dig in a little more about like with the implications for other users or even for us would be running pipelines on all these WIP MRs.
Yep.
And so, I know that one of our cost saving initiatives was to kind of reduce the number of pipelines run.
So I don't know if you saw, but Chad actually just commented on the issue around the pipelines kicking off, and it actually depends on how you configure it. You can kick off a pipeline when a branch is created, when an MR is created. It's all up to the GitLab CI configuration.
I see it now. Okay, well, our particular CI configuration has that, so I don't know that it's worth solving for or being the only reason to choose a direction, but
with commit messages, is it possible to add like an extra like skip CI comment in there for certain commit messages so that it doesn't kick off the pipeline? So for example, save would do a commit, but like we tag on inside the commit message, like skip CI or something, and that wouldn't trigger the CI build. That's a feature, right?
I know we can skip review apps, but I don't know. Do you? We can ask, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. We can follow up on that one there. So then this area up here is one. Let me just close this nonsense. Okay, this is an area that like I was playing around with yesterday. I'm not 100% happy with this area here, so where I had the title of the MR because it looks a little bit busy to me. What I'm trying to convey here is like there's still stuff for you to do within the MR, and then some kind of timestamp to show that like when it was last updated. This is taken kind of like the information from an MR here, like 04 task completed, the MR number itself and the number. And like one potential thing is just to take this layout and then just apply it back over there because it has the kind of key information. But I was questioning whether it's useful to have the number here because we kind of hide it everywhere else. So that was the rationale of changing it. But it looks kind of messy here to me. So
yeah, so similar to exposing the branch name, I don't know whether exposing the MR number is useful or needed even. As an engineer, knowing what it means, like I fully get it, but I don't know if somebody's going to know what exclamation 53426 means who's in sales. So I'm all for not having it. I'd rather have users tell us they're missing information
Yep.
that we can add than provide too much information and then we're confusing people or giving them cognitive overhead that they shouldn't have.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to say also the number of tasks, since it's not actionable in this feature, is probably not relevant, because those are all just derived from the discussions in the threads and open discussions in the review. Also, I was wondering if the status even really matters, because open, you should really only be seeing open. Shouldn't be like, I don't think we want to introduce the idea of reopening merged, or trying to view closed merge requests or anything like that in here. So we might not even need a status.
Okay.
So the other thing I wanted to ask is, so currently the task numbers for MRs is derived by the kind of like checkboxes in the description. The way when I watched your video, it felt more like it wasn't really related to that, but more around the steps that you needed to take to publish this change that you were making. Is that correct?
And that's correct, because when I saw these 0-4 tasks completed, etc., it was aligning to the checklist of like the MR template. So, you know, have you given a good title? Have you assigned a DRI? Have you added a description? Have you used the right template? Those were like the 4 tasks in the GitLab handbook pages. So when I go to publish, this kind of idea of like, once I add a description, this number changes to 3 or 4 tasks. That was where this was coming from. Yes, this is a very GitLab-centric solution to this, but it was kind of to show like a completeness. So we could abstract it away from like the handbook stuff and just have it as like, these are the necessary fields that you need to complete prior, and then maybe that might change where I do that progress bar. But that was the idea behind it.
So for instance,
sorry, I may have completely misunderstood our merge request feature. Is that how the tasks are generated, or would that be something we'd need to build?
So if you look at let
me just jump into.
I think it's simply a convention in the description. If you have a list item that has a dash space, open bracket, space, close bracket, that becomes a checkbox.
It's based on those. So each one of those checkboxes is considered a task. So you could essentially have 100 tasks, and that's like when you have your onboarding issue, it shows you like 0 of 200 tasks that you have to complete. And it's all based on a number of checkboxes.
I completely misunderstood. I thought that mapped to the discussions and the review, like the pending
like the resolving
comments
threads
that were open. So I'm learning something new today. Yeah. Okay. Well, then carry on. Never mind.
So the one thing I wanted to say about this is I could imagine us down the line, long way down the line, where there's some sort of configuration option where there might be specific tasks that somebody needs to do before they can submit publish a change. You know, like there might be more specific fields that they want to ask or so on. So the one thing I when I saw that the tasking is, I'm wondering how much value it gives, and whether we shouldn't rather have other queues, like for instance, the publish button is grayed out until all the required, like indicating what is a required field. For instance, I think you mentioned in the video the assignee wasn't required.
Or like it hasn't, it's required, but it's like not there yet.
So like I was wondering whether, because essentially what I'm seeing those tasks conveying is the things I need to do to get this into a publishable state. But I wasn't making the connection necessarily with what the tasks are, the 3 or 4 tasks necessarily. Like I can see now, you know, like first task was, I guess, make a change. The second one is title, description, and then choose and assign and publish. So the connection between what the tasks were wasn't strong enough for me.
Gotcha. That's good feedback, Jean.
Yeah,
So,
actually thinking more about my comment now that I've learned where they come from, I think still though they are only actionable in the merge request page once the description's parsed out and you can check them off. So, you know,
Yeah.
I
So
think it still
the
holds
thing is,
that you know there maybe that help text isn't necessarily relevant here.
yeah, and it might be confusing if we have tasks here and then it confuses with tasks in the merge request because they're not the same thing. So we might, yeah. The only other thing I could think of is, you know how in a checkout journey you sometimes have step 1, 2, 3
Yep.
is potentially having some sort of step wizard to indicate what you need to go through. But even that might not be necessary. I guess what we're trying to do is to bring some urgency to the user about what they need to do to get this into a publishable state.
Yep.
And whether we do it like this or like, I don't know, have a multi-step process, I'm not sure.
Okay.
And I guess that's what we need to validate and get feedback on.
Cool. I think that's really good feedback. I might play around with some other exploration of this today, because that might remove that like 3 or 4 steps, and I might handle it by putting the progress bar somewhere related to this publish area, because that's where the actions happen. So taking this away and then moving it over here, kind of exploring either like the progress bar, kind of a wizard, or some kind of visual indication that, because what I really want people to do here is like, just by adding some of these fields, you're not like completely done here. You still need to assign stuff to people. So yeah, that's a good feedback, everyone.
One thing I want to mention too is with MRs, we can create our own template, right? So right now it sounds like we have 4 tasks. From my perspective, like the minimal, from a minimalism perspective, there's only one task that actually needs to occur, and that's an approver needs to be set. And then on top of that, if we do in fact deem it very important to have a title, that'd be the second level. And then if a description, which naturally makes sense, that could be optional or then be required, and that would be 3 things. But ultimately, it's, if going through this flow, right, it's like, I'm going to make some edits. There's 2 options: saving in the sense that I want to contribute now, knowing that I want to come back. And then the other fork is basically like, I'm done now and I want to publish it. So then the requirement is essentially assign an approver. And ideally downstream from that would be some way to like be in the loop that that's somehow, getting approved or something like that. But so I don't know if there's a way to, I guess what I'm trying to say, if there's a way to maybe, and again, excuse my ignorance, if obviously you're kind of exploring what could be more in the future, like, further downstream, but I don't know, in terms of immediate needs, it might just be the approver, and that might be a good first iteration. I guess that's what it kind of sounds like to me at the moment anyway.
Cool. No need to apologize about future thinking, because part of this is a kind of a blend of future and like a lot of these features in here will probably take like more than 1 milestone to do. So yeah, don't worry about that.
Yeah, I didn't know if I missed reading some things, so I was, I'm not 100% sure where we are status wise.
Yep. And then where is this? So this is like the editing. So if I exit, and if I wanted to make another change, this is kind of getting into that use existing MR kind of flow. So you choose like an existing merge request, and then you jump into that. And then this is what I'm proposing for like editing of like jumping into an existing MRs at that moment when you choose something. That's when you can change and that's when you can select the MR. Like
So
future, yeah.
just go back to that modal with the list of MRs.
Yeah, let me. I'll just jump into the design views. Yeah.
Yeah. So how would we? What would be the match between? How would we know which list of MRs to show here?
So good question. Because there's like thousands of MRs that could be listed here, and like some are yours and some are not yours. What I was thinking around here is project name, definitely, but the other part would be, that would be a default. I have other designs where there's like a search where you could search for them, but another way we could do that is sorting by recency. So like things that surface up to the top. So it would be similar to landing on this page, but it's kind of like sorted by recency. The other things that we could do is potentially have labels on the MRs that you could filter by. So let's say it's just static site editor stuff. Those surface to the top. Yeah, this is more like an open question. What's possible and what's.
Yeah, because I was thinking you could potentially try and look at, is there an MR with this page already on it? But that doesn't really work for the multi-page edit scenario where you might have edited a page and this is a different one, but you want to make it part of that MR. So and also you can't just limit it to MRs that the current user created, because like I might broadcast that I created this MR and ask people to contribute to it. So it's a really difficult one to provide, I guess, the most relevant options there. And so some sort of search, like I think we'd have to try as our best to have some sort of intelligence to limit the options as best we can, but some sort of search or filtering, like maybe even like as like the search where you have there, where author equals this user or something like that. That might be needed to help get to the right MR that you want to do it. And my concern is, what if I choose the wrong MR and I go and I add to somebody's MR that I shouldn't be adding? That I think is, I mean, I guess that could happen now already, but you'd have to be really deliberate to do it accidentally in the current way.
Well,
whereas here you might just do it by accident.
Yeah, I think that not to harp on this, but that might be another reason why the branch information either is important to either start with or at least surface, because part of the protection for not choosing the wrong merge request is that I can make sure that I'm on the right branch. And I think that I spent a little bit of time yesterday just going through again and looking really closely at how the web IDE handles this. And I don't know, just at a high level, I think we should probably take more cues from how streamlined that process is. And maybe,
okay, so
just the other thing is I'm a little concerned about the performance of building this list for an organization like ours with 940 open merge requests, even if we did have search.
So I want to challenge that again and say, is our target persona going to be comfortable or know about, is showing them a list of branches in any way going to help them with their discoverability? How, especially if we auto-generate branch names and don't allow them to edit it. Like, I would almost say that a MR title match will be more user-friendly for the non-engineering persona versus a branch matching.
That's true. I would also say that maybe we don't need to show branches that weren't created in the static site editor?
Ah,
Like
maybe
the
we can have a prefix of the naming of the branches
or
to be
or
yeah,
labels.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if there's any way to filter that branch list via the API or with any kind of metadata. But I think the kind of user flow I'm thinking of is what if, so this is just off the top of my head.
Yep.
What if we just, we call them something other than branches, like versions or something like that. And these are the different versions of this page. And you create a new version, that's a new branch, and you can just go through. Or if you want to pick up where you left off on a version that you created or a version that somebody else created.
But then again, that becomes difficult when we introduce multiple pages. So it works for the single page versioning, but multiple pages becomes when you have a batch of edits across multiple pages.
That's true.
I'm almost thinking that the MR title here is the right thing, and we add a label to any MR generated with a static site editor. And so we can, by default, we only show, for instance, then MRs here that are, I guess, open and have a specific label.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to
could
start.
work.
And then over time, we'll run into the 940 scenario because everyone would love to use the static site editor, which is good. And then I think we can look at building the smarts on like sorting like yours first or most recent, and then having the search. I think to confirm this, I think right now, like to solve the problem around like accidentally choosing the wrong one, because it's like a little bit too easy. Maybe there should be a second step after this to confirm, like, you're about to make changes on this thing, and then this is where I list like the branch name as well, saying, so that it gives you that extra bit of friction to say, okay, this is like your checkpoint, pay attention here. Yeah, most people would just click, but like at least there's that extra speed bump before jumping into the wrong MR, where the screen would be like, this is the MR you're gonna go to, this is like the path of it, and this is the branch.
We could probably surface the list of files changed in that MR with like a little more prominent link to the MR page to verify that this is the one you want, if you needed to take that extra step, if the title was unclear or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's behind another toggle or collapsed or something like that if it's too much, but that could go a long way to making sure we pick the right one.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do we have data on, so I just did a quick experiment just by looking at the current MRs, like the first like 7 or 8 of them, and then just quickly looking at how many changes were done in each of them. And of the first 7 or 8, there was only, I think one had 2, and the other file was an image edition, and then another one had 3. So I guess basically from an 80-20 standpoint, like we might just actually be working with single files a huge majority of the time. And again, just throwing it out there, maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'm just throwing that out there
Right.
I don't know, it might be solving for an exception case, which ultimately may need to happen, but do we also need to solve for that? I don't know.
I think most MRs that I've seen that involved multiple pages was when you introduced a new page and you needed to add a link to another page to this new page, or when it was updating a specific link or terminology across multiple pages.
Sure.
But I do agree that 80% of the cases, and this is just thumb sucking based on what I've seen, is likely single page updates. And so optimizing for that first as our first iteration is not, isn't invalid.
Cool. We're 10 minutes over the scheduled time at the moment. So I'm going to try to wrap it up. But are there any other areas that raise a red flag, or you wanted to comment on?
I had another comment.
Yep.
Near the end there, we spent a chunk of time thinking about how we could filter this MR list.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we know probably 80-20 scenario is going to be single files, I guess that's not totally important. I guess what I'm trying to get at is we should ping Vasily or Chad or something to basically we might think there's a problem right now in terms of how easy it is to filter this list. I have an assumption that it's actually going to be very simple to do that. And again, whether I know we proposed the idea, we have a special label. If it was edited from the static site editor, that's one way. Again, there's going to be multiple ways, but I imagine it's not going to be that problematic to actually filter a list to what we want. So I would go more from what exactly do we want to show there, and then work backwards of how difficult is it going to be to get us there. Because I, again, could be wrong, but I think it'll be fairly straightforward.
Yeah, I was talking to Pedro from
okay, cool.
within the Create group, and they ran a script to see that they have the script that allows you to see how many files and chunks and line changes. So yeah, I'll try to give this a run, see how that goes. If it doesn't make any sense to me, then I'll share with the team if it makes sense or not. But then, yeah, I might have to enlist someone like Chad or Vasily to help out if it's if I blow up everything. But yeah, this is what I was planning to do, to understand whether 80-20 really makes sense. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. So yeah, should we wrap up here, or is there any other comments to raise?
I think that covers it from my end. I think these are looking great, and we should get a lot of great feedback from our interviewees.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what they say. This for me is kind of like the next big step in our product offering. Right now we're just focusing on the content editing experience, but the workflow is such a big part of making that experience more user-friendly as well. So I'd be really interested to see what their feedback is with regards to whether they feel this will make it easier for them and how much confidence they get out of this.
Cool, sounds good. All right, I'll let everyone go now. And thanks for joining this kind of last minute meeting, but it's been really helpful for myself.
Awesome.
Thanks for putting it together.
What's your daughter's name, Michael?
Her name is Sophia.
Hello, Sophia. Cool.
All right, bye everyone.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.